After seeing Baby Girl, it became clear to me that I needed to stop trusting the early reviews that come from critics because they were just a little off basis on this movie. It's all hyperbole. This is such a sexually charged movie. It's so shocking. It's so daring. This movie is for the freaks. And then I watched this movie, and watching it, I'm like, this isn't the same movie that they watched, apparently. Because, I mean, I guess some critics just think ketchup is spicy. I don't know how else to get around it, but this movie is very tame in a way that I wasn't expecting it to be. And it's just not as charged as I think some people are building it up to be. This was a movie that was certainly overhyped, but that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. So I want to talk about Baby Girl. And needless to say, this movie was overhyped for me, and as a discussion on workspace sexual dynamics, on power dynamics / shifts within power, as a re-examination of the erotic thriller where a female is front and center, I think this movie is pretty much a mess. And I think it comes down to a screenplay that doesn't really have an idea of what it's trying to say. But if you're watching this as a trashy throwback to 90s erotic thrillers, then I think this movie certainly has a lot of fun to be had. And Baby Girl follows a CEO of a major tech company who puts her professional and personal life in harm's way when she enters a torrid affair with a 27-year-old man. Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson star in the leading roles of this movie. And I want to focus on the Nicole Kidman performance for just a moment. But before we do, I ask that if you're watching this video, please like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Back to my review, let's focus on Nicole Kidman, who is the reason to watch this movie. Let's just say it up front. Nicole Kidman is no quitter. She is not someone who backs down from a challenge. She commits fully in a way that she has always done in her career. It's what makes her an excellent actress. It's what makes her such an exciting actress. And it's what makes this movie, Baby Girl, actually quite entertaining to watch throughout some of its illogical moments. And she is, just to be blunt, one of Hollywood's most willing freaks. I think of the fact that she made Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. What she does in that movie, how she's willing to explore her sexuality, her relationship with Tom Cruise at the time, in that movie just shows someone who is unafraid as an actress. And that unafraidness is so crucial for a movie like this. And this film needed to be better for Nicole Kidman. That's what I am fundamentally down to with this movie. Of Nicole Kidman shines so much in this movie that had this movie actually been far more cohesive, I legitimately think this would have been a great movie because she is up for the challenge of this movie. Quite literally, this is a movie where she crawls on all fours and drinks milk like a champ. I mean, just straight up, she does some pretty outrageous, fun, sexy, comedic, just things in this movie. She is bearing it all quite literally in this movie. And she gives off the aura of power, which is so fundamental for her character. And she also converses well, a woman who hasn't had an orgasm from her husband in 19 years. You get that mixture of both. You get the power and then the helplessness from her. This movie has a smartness in its premise, and specifically in the Nicole Kidman performance. This is a movie that tells the story of an extremely powerful woman who still, despite all that she has amassed in her life, still can't feel sexual gratification. And it allows a framework to explore patriarchal societies. It explores the dynamic of relationships. It explores where these fantasies can come from and this feeling of unsatisfaction comes from. Nicole Kidman is game for that movie. And her kink is risk and submission, and it makes sense for that to be something for her. For her, everything is so elevated. She lives at the highest of life. She lives a life that only so few people in this world can understand. Thus, for her to feel anything, it has to be the utmost, and it has to be the utmost extreme. And then in this submissive quality that she craves, she is the boss of everybody. And it allows her at times to just kind of, in some way, find pleasure from no longer having to boss everyone around. So it makes sense that she has these traits. I think that's where this movie has its brilliance in. And that's the quality where a young intern played by Harris Dickinson can just come on the screen and take control, and she succumbs to her desires. That relationship, that forefront of these two's relationship, makes sense. And that's a hell of a premise. And that's not to be underrated because that's what works about this movie. So this movie largely works because this movie is largely focusing on these two characters. It's just that it doesn't fully get there. Yes, Baby Girl does explore work dynamics. Yes, it does explore a woman's lack of agency in men's search for pleasure. And yes, it is a movie about how the risk of being caught is the turn on. That is an exciting premise, and that is one that can certainly have its thrills in eroticism. But the movie just stops committing to that premise. We have this idea of the risk and how the risk is the reward. And this movie becomes stakeless as it goes along. There's no real risk in anything for these characters. You don't feel the stakes of this emotion and this journey that these characters are on. And maybe it's because this Nicole Kidman character is just too powerful, where it feels like she can cover it up. It feels like there is nothing that she can do that she can't get away with. And it's also the narrative structure of this story. There's no twist or turns within this movie. Nothing unsurprising happens in this movie. It's just two adults having consensual sex with some undertones of BDSM. And that's a fine movie about a workplace affair, and that can be exciting in its own way. But I think this film thinks of itself as an erotic sexual thriller. And the sex in this movie is very tame, and there's very little thrills. So when you are promoting and you are making a movie that is an erotic thriller, I just couldn't get on board with the idea that this movie comes to fruition in any way. And this comes down to the director, Halina Reijn, who is a far better director than she is a writer. And I thought this with her last film, Bodies, 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 where I can watch that movie and I can think there is a lot of brilliance that she's able to capture on the screen. I think she can direct hella performances out of her actors. And yet, while watching it, I'm just like, God, some of the storytelling just doesn't make sense with her. I have a disconnect with her as a writer. And the more I thought about Baby Girl, the less it made sense to me. And I want to just take an example from this movie that I think is the penultimate key to understanding my frustrations, because it's a scene that showcases the brilliance of a director and the failures of a screenplay. And I don't think I'm spoiling it, but there is a moment in a nightclub in this movie, and Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson go to a New York nightclub. And this scene is expertly directed. The music, the choreography, the sound, the lighting, everything about this scene feels like a nightclub, maybe the best I've ever seen it depicted in film. It is enthralling. It is exciting. It has a pulse. It has an energy to it that I wish the movie had more of this. And it is a brilliantly captured scene rendered for the big screen. But the issue is the storytelling in this scene doesn't make sense. And to understand why it doesn't make sense, it's a logically stupid scene in the movie. And you have to understand that in this movie, she is a high-ranking CEO. And you don't exactly know what her role in this industry is, but you know she's somehow connected to tech. And there's some packaging going on. It kind of feels like she's Jeff Bezos, to be fully honest. And they never say that directly, but that's the vibe I got while watching the movie, and I think other people got. And so now you have to just picture this scene of the nightclub where she and this guy who's 27 and not her husband go to a nightclub and party. And you just have to flip this with now picture Jeff Bezos being in the same scene, having a secret affair, and getting hot and sweaty in a New York nightclub. This would be all over in the news. She is apparently one of the most famous, the most high-ranking female CEOs in New York City, and no one recognizes her. That's what I'm talking about, where this movie doesn't have risk. There should be a scene of contention. But that's what the movie doesn't understand. It doesn't understand how to have risk. It doesn't understand that's where the tension comes from, and the thrills are baked in. Had this scene been one where it's a little bit more hiding, or she's trying not to get caught and then she gets too loose, whatever, that would actually add that tension that I'm talking about is missing. But this movie fundamentally skips those steps throughout. It's a movie about her turn on being essentially danger, where Kidman's character is never really in danger. I mean, yes, she's having an affair. She doesn't want to get caught. But even if she gets caught, it doesn't really affect anything in the narrative because there's no stakes ever clearly established in this world. Thus, while watching this movie where Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson are getting sexy together, this movie is enthralling at times. I want to be clear. I think this is a good movie. I enjoyed watching this movie. They are both very beautiful actors, bearing it for us, having excellent chemistry. And there's this moment in the film, kind of right at the middle of the film, there's this wonderful sex montage set to a George Michael song that is inherently incredibly goofy and also really just captures a tone of comedic value in a way that I found enthralling. Again, this director really has some talent in this, and I understand what she is trying to capture, but ultimately everything else about this movie is kind of half-baked. If you did not have Nicole Kidman in this movie, this would truly be a baffling movie. And the family dynamic is a big part of this story. Nicole Kidman's character has 2 daughters and a husband played by Antonio Banderas, and there's supposed to be this tension. There's scenes where Banderas comes face to face with her 27-year-old lover, but they don't recognize each other. They don't know of each other, or I should say Banderas doesn't know of him. And these moments should be chock full of tension, and the thrill is the excitement, right? Like that's the whole part of this movie that's being advertised. And again, there's just never stakes in these scenes. And then as you have other coworkers coming in who begin to start suspecting and raise suspicion of this possible affair going on with Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson, again, these are subplots in the movie that kind of get lost. And essentially, this might be the issue of this character is too powerful to fail, which in it of itself is an interesting commentary, but that's not the point of this movie. And the point of this movie is to put it again bluntly, the risk is the pleasure. And I just never felt that risk in the movie. So that is a huge narrative letdown of this movie. Ultimately, I liked Baby Girl. I can highly recommend the Nicole Kidman performance. I think she is legitimately great in this movie, but it is not enough to say that this movie fully worked for me. So I had a good time watching it. I think there was a lot of fun to be had here. It just needed a far better screenplay that this movie was not able to deliver. I'm going 3 out of 5 stars for A24's Baby Girl. So thank you so much for watching. And if you like this video, as always, make sure to like and subscribe. I'll be back Sunday with a review for Night Bitch. Monday, I'll have my worst of 2024. Tuesday, I'll have my best of 2024. And then entering the new year, Thursday, I'll have my most anticipated movies of 2025. And Sunday, starting the week off with Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Foul review coming to you. So make sure to like and subscribe for all that. And thank you so much for watching. Take